Hey, you're listening to Armchair Authentic with Rhett and Justin, a podcast designed to help you fulfill your God assignments by having real conversations about real life with real people. I'm excited today because I have the privilege to interview my best friend and our very own co-host, Rhett Barden. This is an amazing story of God taking pain and turning it into purpose. It's a story of making beauty out of ashes. We're going to jump right in. Our interview with my best friend, Rhett Barden. For me, when I'm listening to, someone in their interview and their story, really just that brief overview of what has been your life, because I really want to dig in and take it back to what got you started and to what you're doing now. But let the audience go ahead and get to know you and who you are and what got you into ministry.
Yeah, and if I could just start off by saying, first of all, this is not a comfortable thing for me.
Yeah.
I love getting to know other people, hearing their stories, and supporting that. And so it's not natural for me to be on the other end talking about my journey and my story. Although I do get to communicate for a living, and I'm grateful for that, and I do add stories from time to time, never in this this format of this authentic, sticking with the name of the podcast, to kind of open up and shed some light on some other areas of my life in a way that's more living room, authentic, a little bit more vulnerable, opening up a little bit more, not very easy. So let me just first say this. If you're looking for a perfect person, I'm not that person. I'm very grateful for what I get to do, but I try to make it very clear to people that I'm on this journey. I think you mentioned in one of the podcasts is we're going from glory to glory. And so that's my hope, is that I'm getting better. But up into this point of this recording, I've been very grateful that I've been serving God faithfully for 30 years. Happily married to the most beautiful, strong, courageous, brave woman. Her name is Linda. Been married for 17 years. Together we have a 15-year-old son. His name is Max, and I love that. By the time this recording airs, he'll be 16, so he'll be driving.
Car, man.
Lord Jesus, help us. But I've been a part of planting. This is crazy. From volunteer or dream teamer to small group leader to associate, in just every facet you could imagine. Been a part of planting 6 churches.
Wow.
In the 30 years that I've been serving Lord. So out of those 6 churches, 2 of those were off-site campuses where I was a part of, whether I was helping lead worship or whether I was the actual campus pastor. One of those was with the Church of the Highlands.
Yep.
And one of those was with a local ARC church plant in Mobile, Alabama. But most recently, I've become the founding pastor of a church that we planted, my wife and son and I, planted in 2018. We were the lead pastors, called One Life Church. It's in Nampa, Idaho, just a little bit west of Boise. So most recently, that's what we've done. So I'm the founding pastor of that church. There are wonderful pastors there who are now continuing to lead the vision, and it's so exciting. That's just so cool. But because of that, I now have the opportunity to offer coaching and consulting to pastors, their staffs, their teams. And my hope really, Justin, is to help pastors and leaders to develop and really deliver systems and processes that truly help fulfill the vision and mission of their church. Is just really come alongside, partner with them, and help them any way I can to move the ball down the field. So I'm getting to do that. But in addition to that, right now I'm currently an executive pastor of Believers Church in Twin Falls, Idaho, which are led by lead pastors, and they founded the church as well, Pastors Clay and Heather Ramirez, really dear friends of mine. And I'm serving them in this capacity right now. But what's interesting is I get to do this from Birmingham, which is really out of the box. And, 2020, when it hit, it kind of changed the whole perspective of how we can do ministry and life and business. And so I live in Birmingham, the area, which is my hometown, born and raised. So I live here with my family. My wife, she works at Highlands College. My son goes to an incredible school, and we're getting to live life here. But once a month, I do spend a week in Twin Falls, Idaho. So I'm there on site. When I'm there, I'm working with their teams. I'm offering any kind of relief I can to the lead pastor. And so it's neat. We can talk more about that later. So that's really kind of cool of what I get to do right now. I'm currently also developing and launching a 501c3 nonprofit called Relief Pastors, where I have the opportunity to offer relief to pastors across the country, which is so cool. And I can't wait to tell you guys more about that as we develop that. But really the heart behind that is to offer relief in the form of preaching, teaching, worship leader, relationships, to pastors, specifically church planters, because that was my world for so long. And I think one of the biggest needs that I realized that I needed was a chance to have a Sunday off every once in a while to where I could be with my family and focus really first on what my biggest ministry was. And a lot of these young pastors, couples who go out to plant church with big dreams, a lot of them are bivocational. They're growing a church. They could be 30, 60, 100. And they're doing well, but unfortunately, they're just not over the hump financially where they can really offer an opportunity for them to get away from a Sunday. Their hands are in everything. And so my hope is through Relief Pastors is to be able to come alongside them and to do it honestly, provide it as a mission. So our goal is really not for them to have any financial burden to have a Sunday off or whatever the need might be, and to come in for free. Based off the mission support that we have from organizations, and be able to really support them, love them, serve them. And in this past year, we did about 4, and where we just come in, love them, give them a Sunday off, and just be able to love their church and their congregation and honor them, and just really help move the ball down the field. And so more of that in the future, and so I'm really, really excited about that. But really our agenda with that is just see a healthy pastor, healthy family, healthy church that goes on for generations. And so that's kind of what we're doing right now, but it wasn't always the case.
Well, when you talk about that, it's this beautiful expression, and you've heard the phrase beauty from ashes.
Yeah.
And so this beautiful expression came from some ashes.
Yeah.
And the thought of saying, I know it hadn't always been this way. Mm-hmm. What are these ashes? Yeah.
And I think that's the part that, is some of the hard part to open up on, but I do this in really hopes to help people understand that God doesn't call the qualified, right? He qualifies the called, and He just loves being able to make beauty from ashes. And I should have been a statistic, based off of the things that I've gone through, and I know you as well. We could relate on that, and so. It wasn't always the case of me being able to do these, what sounds grandioso, right? I come from a broken family, as I mentioned, born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and broken family in that my parents got a divorce. They separated, got a divorce when I was 2 or 3 years old. Unfortunately, I was sexually abused by a teenage neighbor when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And not many people know that. And that's hard for me to even open up and say, but I realize I've held on to that for so long that it's time that I help people and get beyond that. My mom, she died by suicide when I was 7 years old, March 13th, 1985. I love my dad. He's an amazing, amazing father. He did everything he possibly could to provide. And in that season, I was just naturally a latchkey kid. Now, I didn't know that I was a latchkey kid until recently. They put a term to it.
Right.
And I had to look that up. So if you don't know what that is, a latchkey kid is simply a child who returns to an empty home after school or any other activity, or it's a child who is often left at home with no supervision because their parents are away at work. And so it wasn't like my dad was trying to be a bad father. He was just doing everything he could to provide, and we didn't have the money for daycare. So that was just naturally the part. Now, because of that, we're now beginning to see and understand that there are repercussions or consequences that happen in those environments. And that what happened to me. And what I've come to realize is that a lot of what I experienced was low self-esteem. And because of low self-esteem, I was looking for love in all the wrong places and affection. I battled a porn addiction, and this was back before there was the internet. Again, looking for love in all the wrong places. And because of that, even not even serving the Lord at even such a young age, I was dealt with shame, dealt with guilt. As I began to grow older, I began to realize that I was looking for supernatural things. I was just looking in the wrong places. And so I grew up on horror movies, believe it or not, because as a latchkey kid, you can watch what you want, right? And so we watched horror movies, and because of that, I began to dabble in witchcraft. And in that, of like a Ouija boards and just baby stepping into trying to talk to dead people and trying to just get this sense of connecting to something that was bigger than myself. And so the good news is, thank God, at 16 years old, my best friend, who is over here interviewing me at this moment, we were doing life with each other. And I think we've covered some of those topics of how we met. But this brother goes off to a beach trip for a girl, comes back with Jesus, and filled with the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit. And I see a dynamic change. And it was at that moment where I saw a change in my best friend. And because I saw a change in you, and it was real, it wasn't fake, it wasn't religion, it was just something powerful. I was like, that's the supernatural thing I've been looking for.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And so I went to a church service and I experienced the love of God, the power of God in a true, authentic way. And my life was transformed. I gave my heart to Jesus, surrendered my life at 16 years old, and then just try to be faithful not in a religious way at first, but just man, I love this. This is life. This is joy. This is peace. This is family. This is community. All the things I knew I needed, but I didn't know that I needed at such a young age. But all of a sudden I'm experiencing these things. And it was at that point where I fell in love with God and fell in love with the church and just became a part of a family. And I've been serving the local church and the Lord for 30 years since. It hadn't been a perfect journey. In fact, it wasn't always butterflies and rainbows, is what I tell people. Yeah. A lot of people think you give your heart to Jesus and all of a sudden like the light bulb goes off and you're not tempted anymore. And, whatever your vice might be, everybody talks about the big ones, sex, drugs, rock and roll, cussing and all that. Right. But for me, it was this porn addiction from the trauma that I experienced as a kid and looking for love. And so here I am serving the Lord and yet still struggling with the thoughts in my mind because I haven't really come to the understanding of how to win the war in the mind, or the battle of the mind that the enemy works on. And so, and all that came from the trauma that I experienced as a kid. Yeah. But even then, as working into an adult life, even as somebody who loved God as a young adult in my 20s and 30s, still trying to just figure out how to overcome this. I had a head-on collision on October 13th in 1998 in my vehicle. I was 21 years old. Yeah. I should have died. But I walked away with a small scratch on my ear. In the ambulance, like the stretcher, they had the jaws of life to open up the vehicle. Mm-hmm. It was on the newspaper. It was a 6-mile backup on the interstate, and I should have died. Yeah. But by the grace of the Lord in my life at that time, now I'm serving God, I'm in the local church, but the grace of the Lord and the sovereignty, for some reason, it wasn't my time. And I'm grateful. So I sit here today. It's a miracle by God that I did that. But a couple months later, my spiritual father and mother passed away, Rod and Shelley Solomon, and lost them. And 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Got married at a young age at 23, moved to Dallas, Fort Worth with a dream in my heart to pursue ministry, but unfortunately went through a horrible divorce. The girl I was married to at the time ended up cheating on me. I forgave her. And I forgave her. And it one day just come home and to an empty house and ended up in $250,000 in debt, which it took me 17 years to get out of. Praise the Lord, I'm debt free today, but went through a horrible divorce. And I was thinking, here I am, a young man, loving God and wanting to serve God. And what's going on, man? This is crazy. Like, I didn't ask for this. 1 step forward, 2 steps back, but God continue to move forward, serve some toxic leaders in churches. Listen, man, God chooses broken people, and there are no villains in my story. Okay. That's good. But I have served some toxic leaders. I've been hurt. I've been wounded. I've been spiritually manipulated. I've been abused by church leaders, up into the point where one time, and I'm not going to mention names or organizations, but I had a severe panic attack that I thought was a stroke. Ended up going to the doctor, having an MRI and everything, and praise God, it wasn't a stroke, but it was the stress level that I was under due to some toxicity. And that led to depression and been in extreme burnout. And anyway, out of all these different moments that I've experienced, what I really hope that people understand and see is that God was God is, and God will always remain faithful. He has been faithful to me. He's never left me. He's never forsaken me. He's been right with me through every aspect of every moment. And what I realized was that what the enemy meant for harm, God somehow, miraculously, some way, turned it around for good. He took my pain and turned it into purpose, but I had to allow him to do it. And I had to choose to have the perspective in and through every situation to see it that way, that I know who my Father is.
Yeah.
And I know what his word says, but I also know who the enemy is. And I was thinking, wow, I really have a great calling in my life, and God's going to use me for something powerful if I'm having this much attack in my life.
Yeah.
So I speak not from a place of perfection, but as one who's experienced hurts, wounds, pain, but one who has chosen, and I hope to continue to choose this, to persevere in the face of some of life's most critical moments and difficult moments.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I want to share this verse, James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. So let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And so I recognize that God did not cause the pain that I've gone through. He allowed it. Listen, pain is the result of humanity. Pain is the result of the sin of a broken world. And we live in a broken world,
Yeah.
right? I like to say it this way. Broken people like to break people.
Yeah.
Just like hurt people. What do? They hurt people. Right? And so I've just chosen to accept this verse as truth, and that's James 1:12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person, here's the promise, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. And so my life verse, Justin, if you were to ask me any time from the pain that I've gone through, when I found this verse, I held onto this verse, and it has gotten me through so many things, and that comes out of Proverbs 3 through 6. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Like whatever you do, keep that close to you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Why? Because then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. So, he says in verse 5, trust in the Lord. Just trust.
Yeah.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding.
So good.
When things are going wrong, when things are upset, when people are walking out on you, people are hurt, listen, don't lean on what you see, on what you hear, and what you're experiencing, not on your own understanding, but in all your ways. That's in everything. Good, bad, ugly, highs, lows, valleys, deserts, mountains, whatever. In everything that you do, is just submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And so I am a living testimony of that verse, that no matter what has ever come my way, I'm not a perfect person. I have sin issues and things that I'm vices and different things that I'm still working through and overcoming and all of that, even as a pastor. But I've chosen that despite what I'm going through, that I will trust in my God with everything that I have. And I'm not going to look to the situation. I'm not going to look to the circumstance. I'm not going to look to the person that's in my life that might be causing the pain. I'm not going to lean on anything that is my own physical, earthly understanding, but I'm going to submit my life to God. I'm going to trust him, because his word says that he will make my path straight. And that's what he's done. And so I know our pastor will say, you can get to, we live in Birmingham, Alabama. Atlanta is about 2 hours east of us. Nashville is about 3 hours north of us. And I think he said it this past Sunday, or whenever. He said, you can get to Atlanta by going through Nashville. But it's better just to get to Atlanta. You can get there a whole lot quicker, right? And so I feel like my life has been a series of trying to get to Atlanta through Nashville, through Chattanooga, through Knoxville. Let's go up to Pennsylvania and down the East Coast to Atlanta. But that's just kind of the story of my life. But I've seen God straighten out the paths. Again, no villains. I've made my own decisions in certain areas, and I've experienced certain pains in my life due to the choices that I've made. And it's nobody's fault. I mean, you know what I mean? So nobody's to blame. But what I can say is that God will make your path straight. He has done that. He continues to do that. And my hope is, Lord willing, that I'll continue to live with this being my life verse, trusting him, looking to him, submitting to him, and seeing my path straight until I see him face to face. And not for my glory, but for the glory and honor of God and his son Jesus.
Well, this can go in so many directions right now.
Yeah.
But what I want to really breathe in right now is the authenticity. This is Armchair Authentic.
Yeah.
My interview went down a certain course of identity, a surrender, if you will. Your course right now, and as the interviewer, what I want to say first is you're being so authentic through this process, but I'm on the other side through all these years. And one of my deepest respects for you, when you've gone through what would be this hell, I've seen this innocence maintained on you, where you really have reflected this person as, I am so dependent on God that you haven't become jaded in the Lord. And yes, maybe people, all this stuff can happen. You got to heal from that, but you haven't been jaded with Jesus ever. You've fallen deeper and deeper in love with him. And what I would also say is the way that you have handled a lot of these situations. It reminds me of the story with King David, or it was David then, and King Saul. You're not going to toot your own horn, but I've seen how you've handled this process, and you've been able to maintain this humility and wonder. I want to even take it back a little bit. You're in Texas, and you went there for really pursue ministry with schooling, but also full-time job and marriage, as you said that. Could you take us through some of that experience of, you said you've been a part of 6 church plants.
Yeah. And so to back up, I am from Birmingham, born and raised. And so when I got married at a young age in my early 20s that I mentioned, I did have a dream to pursue ministry. And at that time, there was an open door to go to Christ for the Nations in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, which is a missions college, really, more than anything. And so, and as I pursued that, there was an open door that came from relationship from me, and to take on a full-time worship leading position. Because as I mentioned in the past episodes, worship was always the door that opened another door. And so worship was what I thought I was going to be doing for my entire life. And if I could just time out and say that worship is not just 3 songs on a Sunday. Yeah, that's right. But so when I say worship, I mean worship. When I wake up and I'm talking to God, that's worship. When I pray, that's worship. When I work, but at that time in that season of my life, I thought like leading an organization or the ministry of a church with choirs and bands, that's dating me, choirs and bands and frontline teams and vocalists, all of that as worship leading for Sunday experiences. So I was a part of a church called New Life Christian Fellowship, and it was a beautiful church. And the pastor there, met him, came on staff. When I went through the divorce, I was on staff at that church. So because of needing to take a step back and roll, I pulled back and started working a $10 an hour job at that point, doing anything and everything I possibly could because of the infidelity that was happening in my marriage, that, due to decisions that were beyond my control in that unfaithfulness that happened. And so all of that went down. And when all that happened, I was looking for, really honestly, I didn't think I was going to be serving the Lord anymore in ministry.
Yeah.
And so there was a church in Frisco, Texas, and it was a church plant. And God bless them, they were just desperate. And I can say that because I told them, I said, here's the situation I'm walking through. Here's just what I went through. I'm broken. I'm hurting. I'm wounded. I love God, and I'll be glad to serve you, but I just want to be very transparent. This is the stuff I'm walking through. And they were like, listen, like, we are so sorry you're going through that, but like, we need you and we want you. And so I was like, okay. So, and it was truly just an opportunity for me to try to make a little bit more money. So I resigned that other position at the other church, went through some time and some healing. And then this church opportunity presents itself, served there 3 years. In that process, the Lord, restored unto me. I remarried,
Yeah.
my wife now of 17 years. So that first marriage did not end in restoration.
Yeah.
Or let me say it this way. The first marriage did not end in reconciliation is what I should say. But it did end in restoration, and meaning that I wasn't reconciled to that person because of their choices. Okay. But God restored to me what the enemy tried to take from me in Linda, who I've been married to 17 years, going on 18. And my life now is beautiful because of it. So I'm married then. We're going to this church. We get married. It's about 3 years in that I'm serving that church. And at the end of that 3 years, getting married to my new bride at that time, it was like God just began to speak and said, hey, you've served this church faithfully for 3 years, and it has grown. But I'm calling you onto something that's next with your wife and everything. So it's like a new chapter, new season for us. Yeah. And so we finished our time there really well at that church. And then that's when we found out that Blaine Bartel, who was a part of Church on the Move, which everybody would know,
Willie
George Ministries, their youth ministry grew and exploded, and it was called 180. And their youth pastor, they used to have a TV show that came on at night. It's kind of like a Saturday night. Yeah, it was like a Saturday Night Live type thing that they did, that they produced. And so Blaine Bartel was a big part of that.
Cutting edge.
Yeah, it was so cutting edge at the time. And he, along with, what's the other guy's name? They did big conferences and stuff around the globe. I can't remember his name. Anyway, so I found out that they're, Blaine and his family are coming down, and my wife grew up on their ministry, and I grew up a little bit with their ministry, and we were in a season of transition, and they were planting the church from scratch at the Frisco Event Center, Conference Center there, in downtown Frisco. And so, yeah, we just went to the launch meeting and started serving as a volunteer, and I'm working a full-time job, and my wife's cutting hair full-time, and we dived very, very deep into serving on worship, mainly because that was, again, my main thing. And so I'm not worshiping, but I'm serving Pastor Blaine in this vision, and I'm serving the music pastor, because I had a pastor over music, and I'm serving them, and just as a volunteer. And what's crazy is at the time, I wasn't living in Frisco. Because we had to relocate due to some financial things that I was going through. And we were like, I think it was 87 miles one way we drove to church.
Yeah.
And not only drove to church on the Sunday, 87 miles, but Thursday night band rehearsal.
Yeah.
So I would leave work from downtown Dallas, drive up the Dallas North Tollway, it'd take me about 45 minutes, an hour, get there, do all the worship rehearsals. And I'm just a volunteer. I'm not getting paid or anything. And then we finish rehearsal around 9:00, and then I drive 87 miles south. And what I would say, the first church that I served, the New Life Church in, not to be confused with any other New Life, but it was New Life Church in Dallas. What I learned in that specific season was, as a, early 20s, was that if I look back and unpack the layers, I made a decision to take that, and you don't know what you don't know, but I feel like looking back, I made the decision to be a part of that church based off of money more than I did ministry or really hearing the voice of the Lord. Because what I did hear the voice of the Lord is call us to Christ for the nations.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily hear the voice of the Lord to take this job full time and to make that my full time thing, and then to kind of shelf Christ for the nations. But that's what happened, because they were paying me a lot of money at that time. But what I realized 3 months in, 6 months in, I was miserable at that first church.
Yeah.
Because I was getting paid well, and I loved what I got to do on Sunday. I just listen, nobody's a villain. They're wonderful people, and it's not them. It was more me. But I did not connect with the vision of that church. I did not connect with anything in that church, with the leadership of that church. There was no really relational connection outside of they're paying me really well. And because I was not attached to that vision, I did not see that church going in any direction outside of what it was already doing, which is not to say it was great or bad. It just was what it was. But I felt like God was calling me to something that was going to be a little bit more impactful down the road, and it wasn't going to happen here. And what I realized through that is that I don't want to take a job just because they're paying me well to do what I get to love. I would rather work a full-time job secularly, if you will, making $10 an hour or whatever. I didn't care at that time, and be in a place where the pastor has vision.
Yeah.
And be a part of a community where we're a part of something. The part that we play is so much, I don't know how to say this correctly, and haven't said it in forever, but It's like feeling like I'm a part of something bigger than myself, really. And I was like, I just want to be where God wants me. And I don't care what I get. I don't even have to be full time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that I learned from that first. And because I learned that, and I was like, I don't want to be miserable making a ton of money. I would rather be happy working in the world, in serving the local church, and getting to be a part of something that has a lot of big vision, that's doing something that's making a difference. And I feel like I'm a part of that. All right. So that's the layer, that's the foundation. And because of that layer, because of that foundation, when we went to be a part of, at that time it was North Star with Pastor Blaine, I felt like we're a part of this. This is where we're going to be. Right. 3 years in, I'm noticing like the church is growing. They're starting to hire staff and people, and something in my spirit is like, man, I would love to be on staff. I just really would. And I shared that with Pastor Blaine. He's like, oh man, you're our next hire. Like those were his words. Yeah. You're our next hire. And I was like, man, this is great. It's where I want to be. It's here in Texas. I'd love to all of that. And there was just not, I don't know how to explain it, but looking back, it's been a while, man. I'm opening up some doors in my brain that haven't been open in a while. But looking back, it was like, you think you want to be a part of this, but at the end of the day, I just began to feel a stirring that was going a different direction, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Mm-hmm. And I was honestly, at that point, you and I were connecting, and it was around, when was Church of the Highlands planted? 2001?
2001, February.
Yeah. And what year would this be? 2007, 6?
Yep.
6, 7, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
So if this is 2006, so Highlands is 5, 6 years old at this point, right? And I'm living kind of vicariously through your journey with what we kind of dialed into in one of the last episodes. And I'm like, well, this is in my hometown. This is amazing what God's doing. How cool to be a part of something like that. I never thought we would be on staff. I never thought like it would happen. I just felt like Texas is where it was, but we were getting stirred. We were feeling stirred in this whole season with our family, and 3 years into serving this church that honestly is growing. It grew to 600 people by the time I left, and it's great. But I couldn't put my finger on it. But I was like, I would rather be mm-hmm. where God's calling me to be than be full time on staff. And I think it was that to where I was like, there was a stirring for Birmingham. There's a stirring for Birmingham, for Church of the Highlands. And it wasn't, let me just be honest, it's not about an org, it's about a people. It wasn't about a person. It wasn't even about a name of an organization. It's about a people, a community, in the snowball and the momentum that was rolling to make a huge difference in my hometown. I think that was a huge part of it. And so yeah, because I was like, I'm never moving back to Alabama, bro. Like that ain't happening. And by the way, I don't care how old you are. Never say never, because God has a sense of humor. I've moved back twice. Okay, we'll see how long this one sticks. Yeah. But so with that, I began to share that dream with my pastor that I was serving faithfully for 3 years. In my gut, I was like, what? Regardless of job or no job, I'm called to Birmingham, and I'm called to be there. And I told my wife, and I told you, I felt like if for anything, I'll get it. I was working transportation at that moment. I'll continue to work my transportation job just to get me there so I can learn. Again, the foundation was, I don't want to go out and get paid full time to be in ministry, because I could do that anywhere, but I didn't want to be anywhere. I want to be where God wanted me.
Right.
And so I felt God was calling me there. Told my wife, Linda, I said, I feel like we're called. And so I'm going to get a job, and we're going to move just to go to Church of the Highlands. And that's what happened. I just had a heart to serve the local church. I didn't really care if I was full-time or not. I just wanted to be obedient and to be where God called me and to be faithful. And that's what we did. So I end up in Birmingham. And then next thing I know, like the very next Sunday, I'm leading worship at Grants Mill on the platform, playing keys next to my best friend. And then fast forward, I end up on staff.
The encouragement to people who are listening is God was going before you, and you still made a faith step.
Yeah.
And you moved your family 11 hours back to Birmingham. And so your story takes you from Birmingham to Texas. You're involved in those different cities in Texas with these church plants. You then come back to Birmingham, Alabama. You begin serving the local church of Church of the Highlands. You come on staff. So let's set up that moment. What was that like, this next phase of your life?
Let me make it very clear. Church of the Highlands is our church home. I do serve Believers Church in Twin Falls, and so that's home for me. But when I'm here, my family, we're involved at Church of the Highlands. And so, yeah, I mean, I was so thankful for the opportunity I had to be able to serve Church of the Highlands and to serve it faithfully. What I would say is a part of my journey and my process with Highlands and being on staff and serving and helping plant the Montgomery campus along with the campus pastor, and I was worship pastor or worship leader at that time, is that God was stirring in me and developing in me. I remember going back, I felt like I had a 5-year, I don't know, there was something about this 5-year. I felt like I would be a part of Highlands for at least 5 years. And we were really close to hitting that 5-year mark. And there was just some stuff in me. I realized that there was more in me than worship leading.
Yeah.
And I was growing, and I was in my 30s at this point. And I felt like, I was seeing through the lens of other gifts and gift sets that God has put in my life outside of just singing and playing a keyboard and raising up a guitarist and all that. I'm not saying there's anything greater than that. That's amazing. Those things are awesome. But for me and my story and my age and my season of life, there were other things God was leading me towards. He was developing those. And with that, at that time in the season, the way the organization was, it's changed now, but the way it was then was, there really wasn't anything beyond for me at that point. Yeah. It was either just, you're going to be a worship leader and that's it, and that's fine. But for me, there was more, and I knew it. And so leadership and I met, we talked through that. We ended up, based off the relationship you have with some other church planners, met Ark Church Planner in Mobile, and ended up coming on staff there as a worship pastor, which eventually kind of leaned into a lot of associate pastor deals, which then leaned into planting a campus because of all the things that I learned from Church of the Highlands. Yeah. So the church there, and this is not, trust me, this has nothing to do with Rhett. Period. God is sovereign and would have done it without me. I just happened to be there. But we were a part of implementing systems, right, that delivered the vision for the church in Mobile. They were around 400 people. They were at 4 years old at that point. By the time we left, I think I feel like, and I could be wrong, so don't quote me on the numbers, but we were over 2,000 people at our last Easter before we left the church in Mobile to go plant the church. And so again, I'm not taking kudos for that. There are a lot of leadership things that happen, but I do know the things that we implemented with the infused development process with the musicians. I do know the things we implemented with the dream team and the small groups, and how I oversaw all of these pastoral care type things that kind of created a net, if you will, to assimilate people, not just to come to church, but to be the church.
Well, what was cool in that season was how you started. You felt the sense of shifting, not just worship pastoring, but also stepping into the broader sense of the church. Yeah. You started doing that, really becoming an associate pastor to that local congregation. And then they're ready to step into their first campus plant.
Yeah, video launch campus that they've never done before, and I oversaw all of that.
Yeah, so there's no staff to do this. There's really no team. You become a student whenever it's time to do something. Yeah. Even with our podcast right now, you've become a student to understand in the same way you became a student of what it takes to successfully plant high level of a church plant. Yeah. So go through that. What was that like, that learning process, and what were you tasked to do? Literally everything?
Yeah, I was tasked to do everything. I just learned. Here's the thing, like, I don't know all things, but I know people that do. Yeah. I think one of the greatest leadership principles you can learn is that you don't have to be an expert at everything, but you need to know the people that are. Yeah. And then you need to build a relationship with them and then tap into that. Yeah. And allow them to be the experts. And so all I did was call a lot of people. Now, granted, the two churches in Texas, well, actually three, there was the New Life, then there was the Frisco Community Fellowship before North Star, all three of those church plants, completely different type of plants. One was an elementary school, one was a convention center, one was a warehouse building type thing, right? And so like I've seen what not to do. And I've seen what to do. Mm-hmm. And then in Church of the Highlands, I'm here, and then I'm a part of like doing church in a little chapel that was called River Chase, and it grew to a building, and then helping the Montgomery campus and doing that in a massive auditorium that was portable, set up, and as far separated as you could possibly do. And honestly, doing it really wrong, even in some of those scenarios, and learning through it. And so while I had those experiences, I learned from those, and was like, we're not doing it this way. We're going to make this as easy as possible for everybody. But at the same time, I'm calling people, and I'm learning, And I would even say that I learned a lot from that, of when we went to plant the church in one life, I was able to do it for a lot less because of the things that I learned. All that to say, all the things that go into that, we don't have enough time for the podcast, but you can imagine, from all the portable things that you would need, from AVL to kids to trailer to the center itself, to making sure we've got all the pipe and drain, all the things, church in a box, if you will, to pull up in a trailer, and the teams, and raising up the team and developing the team and walking the teams through all of what the expectations are and the vision. And it wasn't my vision. Like, I'm here to serve the pastor's vision.
Right.
So I'm still worship pastor. I'm still associate pastor. I'm still over small groups. I'm still helping with the dream team coordinator at that time that I helped raise up, and overseeing helping oversee those things on top of planting this campus that is a satellite video campus. And I am now the campus pastor, and I'm leading worship there too.
Yeah.
So,
jack of all trades.
And I'm not saying as if that's something that's healthy and you should do,
but it's something you did do.
But I'm saying it is something I did do, and everything that I've gone through has been a school to lead me to the next. And I never would have dreamed it would be planting my own church, because I had no desire to ever do that.
I want to go there with this next step of ministry. You end up planting a church.
Yes.
Let's talk about the lead up to this. Your campus pastor, all the things that you just named that you're involved with. Really, you are, really associate pastor, you're serving the pastor. You're helping their dreams come true.
Yes.
Which is wonderful, by the way. You've always been really, really good at that. And I would say that's the foundation of our ministry. We do live to see our leaders' dreams and assignments come true. Beautiful. I think
because there's a promise to it.
There is a promise to it.
You reap what you sow, man.
That's right. And so in that season, though, you're doing this.
Yeah.
And there begins to be a stirring. Let's talk about that, because that was an overtime for years as friends. That's why I want to set this up. As friends, as a confidant, there are things we're going to talk about that no one's going to know about on both ends, right? We reciprocate that. So I always knew from you, Rhett, that for years you had mentioned, I just feel this stirring that at some point in life, we're going to plant a church. But you were so faithful to where you were, you really never let your mind fully go there. And you had always said that if the Lord ever really seemed to tee up that moment for you, you would at least let the desire be known, but still submit it.
Yeah.
Talk about that season.
Yeah. So when we went to Mobile to serve the church, I had no desire to ever really to plant. I wouldn't think, I want to lead worship, I want to create incredible. And then of course, all the things we just mentioned that we did for the church. It was 2015, went to an art conference in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm sitting somewhat in the back, kind of halfway up. If you think the floor is kind of like slightly level, like an old movie theater would be. I'm dating myself here. That's kind of like sloped, but then they have stadium seating, and I'm in like the back far stadium seating, and I'm not sitting where the cool kids sit. All that to say. And so I got this little pamphlet in my lap here, and I'm not opening it, and it's just a little like kind of conference-y type thing, couple pages in it. And I'm seeing all these young guys, man. Like, it felt like they were in their mid 20s and early 30s. And here I am, late 30s, almost 40 years old, like 39, 40, whatever it was at the time. And I think it was 38. Anyway, I'm sitting there going, I'm looking and I'm hearing all these great stories of all this impact and what they're doing. And of course, I've been a part of planting churches, and, and I begin to think, man, I think if God were to ever call me to plant a church, I've done missed it. Because obviously you got to be young, you got to be spry, you got to be like, you got to have all this energy. And don't get me wrong, I had a ton of energy at the time, but like I was looking at age, and literally I was having the thought, God, I've missed them. If that's what you're going to call me to one day, I've done missed it, because obviously you're raising up this generation and they're crushing it, and you're not calling old people anymore to plant churches. And I mentioned that for a reason, because it was after that thought, and it was like near the end of a session, nothing's happening, people are moving around. I'm looking at my lap, just sitting in my chair, and I'm still got this little article. And I open it up, and there's an article for Ross Parsley in his church. I think it was One Chapel in Austin, Texas. And it was a story in their journey, he and his wife. And I read through it, and it comes down to, and I wish I had it in front of me right now. I have it in my office area, but it says, if you think you're too old to plant a church, maybe, just maybe, I'm paraphrasing, maybe just maybe God's calling you to take all what you've learned all these years to pour into the next generation of leaders and church planters. In essence, it was like, if you're sitting there thinking you're too old to plant a church, because he was 45.
Yeah.
And here I am, 38 at the time, thinking, man, I'm pushing 40, and I'm thinking through all those things. And I just began to weep, and I'm crying, and I'm like, get yourself together, man. You know what I mean? And I know that I can like cry, and I'm okay. Like I'm the guy that watches movies, and like I'll have a tear come out of eye watching Andy Griffith. It's ridiculous. Just over Opie and Andy, but like I am like kind of weeping, not uncontrollably, but just enough to go, please don't draw any attention to yourself. Cause I don't want to think, I just don't want any attention on me. And so I leave that conference and I share that story with my wife, and I'm like, what do you think? And I kid with her, and she's like, yeah, we ain't doing that. And that's not happening. No, because of all the stuff we've gone through and been through, and far as churches and stuff. And we just know how hard it is. Right. And so I kind of hide it, and then go to another year goes by, and I can't shake it. And I'm thinking, cause I've learned, listen, if it's a good decision now, to be a good decision later, and I'm not going to make emotional decisions. I'm just going to allow it to set, to simmer, and allow the Holy Spirit to let my emotions go through the roller coaster that they will. And a year later, I'm still kind of sensing like, I think there's something to it. So we go to and guess what? It's another art conference. This time it's in Birmingham. And this is the way I share the story. My wife might share it a little bit differently, but this is how I remember it. She basically, after that conference, said, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? I'm still feeling this when it comes down to this. And she's like, yeah, I think, not I think, I know we're supposed to do this. Like, it's evident that we're supposed to do it. And so I'm like, okay, and then I'm thinking, well, how in the world do you transition that? Here we are, just launched a church, campus, I'm a campus pastor, and, all of those different things in Mobile. And here I am getting this stirring. How does that work? Well, I'm very grateful for the organization we're a part of. ARC is a beautiful network of community, and they actually had a session where like, hey, if you're on staff at church, and hey, if you're a lead pastor, hey, lead pastors, this is how you should respond. Hey, those on staff, this is how you should do it. And so one day I'm sitting down in the new year of 2017, and I'm sitting down with a meeting with my pastor at that time, and he says, hey man, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing good. He's like, I don't believe that for a second. Like, kind of like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And I had already met with Linda and said, hey, when this moment comes, if it comes, I could lose my job the moment I share this. I just recognize, I just know I could. Like, because I don't think pastors are trained in how to really respond to these things. Mm-hmm. And not everybody has this security gland. A lot of them have insecurities regardless of how well they look and sound and carry themselves. And it's hard probably not to take it personal. Yeah. And so I just didn't know. So I told Linda, I said, if we are both in agreement that we know that this is something we're called to, we don't have a city, we don't have a state, we don't have nothing. We just know that one day, 5 years down the road, 6 years, 3 years, like we're not thinking about, but like we just know that one day that we're called to do this. And I told her, I said, if the opportunity presents itself, are you okay with me sharing it? Because if you are, chances are I might not be on staff very much longer. And she was like, I'm in agreement. It's okay. You can share it. Like, I'm okay if you lose your job over sharing what we know God's calling us to sometime in the future. Right. And if this organization doesn't understand it, somebody will, and that's okay.
That's good.
That's where we were. And so that opportunity came. He said, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing good. He said, I don't really feel like, and then at that moment I was like, I've just felt a little gentle nudge. Go ahead and open up. And so I began to just say, I don't know how to share this. I love this church. I love you. I love your family. I love everything that God is doing. I'm so honored that I've gotten to be a part of this, but God has been stirring something in me, and I don't know how to share it. And I do recognize that I'm getting very vulnerable in this moment. And I was crying. I was weeping, not in a I'm scared to death, but like, it's just emotional of just the stuff that God's birthing in you, and you're sharing that, being very vulnerable with somebody. So I said, I feel like God is calling us to plant a church. I don't have a city. I don't have a state. I don't have anything. I just know it could be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. We're called here in this season. I'm not thinking about anything else, but you're asking me, and I want to be honest, and I want to honor you. And I'm telling you that someday, somehow, some way, we are called to plant a church, and I have no idea what it looks like. And more likely it's not Alabama, because I just didn't feel it. And so I'm like, all right, here comes the door, right? And gracefully, I wasn't let go that day, right? And that's a lot to process. And so it began a journey.
So what was that like in that moment? What was the pastor's reaction?
In that moment, the response was, thank you for sharing that with me. And then everything was kind of like, hey, we'll process this and all of those kind of things. And at the end, he kind of joked. It was like, I could have fired you today, right? And I was like, okay, yeah. And he's probably completely kidding, but I was like, at the same time, that's kind of that little like, I'm like, yeah, I know. And whatever your decision is, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm here because I was like, I want you to be an elder. I want you to be a part of this. I didn't know how else to open up myself.
Yeah.
And so then it was a journey, a few weeks in, and needless to say, I wasn't on staff very much longer. And our journey kind of got fast forward a little bit faster than I would like to have seen. But, every leader makes their decisions that they feel are best for their team, their organization, their church. And I have to respect that and honor that. And would I have liked to have seen that transition be a little bit better? Absolutely. But I feel like looking back, they felt like they made the best decision that they knew how to make. And I know 100% that we honored every bit of their decisions.
So what was a future church plant one day, learn from him as much as you can, turned into all of a sudden we're planting a church?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm trying to do the best that I can to see both sides to it. And I hope you hear the heart behind that. It was hard in the sense of going, okay, I was not ready for this.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't looking to plant a church in the next year.
Right.
What I would have liked to seen happen was us be able to work together and do this in a partnership and really transition well. Like, well. Like, in my mind, would have been like, let's continue to move this ball down the field in a year and all that. But looking back, it's part of like, I'm grateful that we didn't too as well. It's like, I'm glad we didn't postpone it, but I felt like we still could have transitioned a little bit quicker, not as abruptly as we did. But when we were at the point of, okay, well, here's what's interesting. When you have a house and you have a mortgage and you have to have so much money to pay for that and all that, and then all of a sudden now you don't have a severance, none of that stuff really, what's funny is God sold our house and we didn't even put it on the market. Somebody came to us and said, we want to buy your house. Wow. and at that point, that was a sign to the Lord and to Linda and I, and like, God's in this.
Yeah.
He foresaw that we were going to be let go before. And when our last day was, he was like, I know you need to go and sell your house and all that. I was like, no, our house is already sold. He's like, what? I was like, yeah. I said, I didn't even put it on the market. I said, somebody came up to us and said, we want to buy your house. And that was just a little like God nudge to go, I'm taking care of him.
Yeah.
And I'm taking care of this family. We had a church family in Wetumpka, Alabama, which, by the way, I'm still good friends with, dear friends with Tripp Healy and Rebecca Healy. They're the pastors of Ridge Church in Wetumpka, which is in the Montgomery area. So when I was serving Montgomery, I was building relationships with their churches. And so when I transitioned, I think this is important to say, before I took the job in Mobile and I was no longer on staff at Highlands, I was serving the very next Sunday or the 2 Sundays later at Ridge Church.
Yeah. Just
loving them, serving them on stage. And I'm a local church guy, man. And because of that relationship, when I was in transition from Mobile and didn't see it coming, they were like, come up here. We'll got a place for you. We'll put you in this little rental house. You don't have to worry about anything. Our worship leader is actually in transition. Come up here, be our worship guy. We'll support you. We'll send you service through the end of the year. We'll financially take up an offering, and that's what we did. So
I remember you telling me, I said, so where are you heading next? And you said, we're either heading to Wetumpka or Birmingham.
Yeah.
We don't really have it set yet, and literally is your moving truck.
Yeah.
It's packing.
Mm-hmm.
You've packed your truck. You were about to head out thinking you're probably heading to Birmingham, and you get the call.
Yep.
that a house had just opened up and there is this opportunity, and you went to Wetumpka instead. And I remember finding that out.
Yeah.
Thinking,
exactly
man, I thought you were going to be in Birmingham.
Yeah. I mean, we knew we just needed to be around family, and we were just going to, park the truck somewhere, unload it in storage and figure it out, move in with family in Birmingham. But we didn't realize we'd be moving in with spiritual family halfway in between.
So good.
And it was beautiful, and it was stressful, and it was hard, and it was like, what are we doing? Because granted, I got this dream to plant a church. They have no money. That dream and that vision lived in my heart, bro, in my head. It was non-existent other than there. People ask me, you planted the church and it launched on September the 16th of 2018. I'm like, no, it's lived in my heart since 2015. It just didn't have a name. It didn't have the finances or resources. It just took time. So it all comes back to honor, how you honor going in, honor going out, love, and just trust the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. God, you called me to plant a church, but what in the world is all this? Like, I'm homeless now, and but just trust me, I'll make it straight. And he did.
Well, all right. That was part 1 of a part 2 interview with Rhett. Hey, we just want to say thank you for taking the time to rate and review our podcast. It means so much. And we also want to continue engaging with you. You can reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram at Armchair Authentic, on X at ArmchairAuthPod, and of course, you can email us, info@armchairauthentic.com.